Hello everybody, welcome. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay respects to elders past and present. My name is Jane St Vincent Welch. I'm a documentary editor representing the Australian Screen Editors Guild. And I'm here today with 5 of the 2017 AACTA nominees for editing. For Best Editing in a Feature Film, we're lucky enough to have Nick Meyers for Australia Day. So it's a pretty impressive list of credits there. Merlin Eden for Hounds of Love, on the end there. Alexandre de Franceschi for Lion, sorry, Alexandra. And for Best Editing in Television, we have Rodrigo Balart for 7 Types of Ambiguity, Episode 1. He actually worked as an assistant for Alexandra, and it shows you. Yeah. See, where a great mentor can take you. A long way. Yeah. And Toby Trappel for Masterchef Australia, Episode 1. So, today's session, thank you very much for coming. It's terrific to see you all here. What I really want to talk about is about drama, the drama in editing. You know, at the start of a project, you get the script, the rushes, and the performances. Then after you assemble the script, there are more than words on the screen, and that's the stuff I want to talk about. So I want to ask you first, Nick, when you started assembling Australia Day, did you do an assembly of each story? The Aboriginal girl escaping violence, the Asian sex worker, the brother's revenge as a whole, like each story, or did you follow a script and then the intercuts between these 3 storylines?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because of scheduling, the individual stories are pretty much shot in order that they each occurred, because they had the actors for those stories. So you would see each story developing, like you'd see the story about the Aboriginal girl, you'd get that and you'd put that together, and so you'd get a sense of that. But I was assembling it, but also leaving, spaces for the eventual other scenes to arrive. But then the next story was shot, and then finally the third one was shot. So I was experiencing them in that way, but as the pieces were coming in, I was putting them where they belonged in the overall picture. And then we were able to sit back and just watch it, as the script. But I had experienced it myself inadvertently in the
which is a very useful way to do it, I think. That's how they. And then to see, so you then assemble those stories per the script?
Yes, yeah.
And then what happened? You're looking at these stories, but did you keep those sequences, the chunks, against one another?
Oh,
did they stay
or...? No, of course not. Because, it's always moving around, really, and what works on the page doesn't necessarily work on the screen. So... it would be a miracle if it hadn't changed, actually. So it was and in fact, even before we moved on from the assembly, and during the shoot, Creve had had a bit of a brainwave. He'd done the shot of the Aboriginal girl running through a tunnel, and it was supposed to be much earlier, but he thought this is going to be a fantastic title shot. And so in his head, he'd restructured the scene so that we'd end the whole prologue on that moment, and then the title would come up. So that was, even during the shoot, that sort of stuff had been going on.
So, but what is it? What is it that makes you move a scene around? What makes you put it somewhere and then change it? What are you looking for? It's like... What I want to sort of try and nail down and drill into is what makes you change things, because of what? Because of the build and the tension to going from one scene to another? because I want to talk about how you work the pacing within those scenes, within the overall structure. So it just, you've got to build, and then the next story, build. Oh, that's too high there. That's going too much higher. That's lower. So how, like when you're watching it through, you kind of do it instinctively, don't you? You sort of sit there.
I guess so, but that's not a very satisfying answer.
No.
Yeah. To tell you the specifics of what happened there is hard for me to remember. Yeah, but I remember that, there's the easy things to remember, to tell you for me, are things where, it might just be falling flat or taking too long, perhaps, is the obvious thing. The other, and they're simple, relatively simple things to address. You probably might remember that the film is doesn't have a huge amount of coverage. I suppose the interesting thing about the structure on Australia Day is it doesn't have a lot of coverage. And the interesting thing about that is, on the smaller scale within scenes, there's not a huge amount to do. The scenes were shot in either single takes or possibly 2 takes, and so there'd be, some scenes, some of the shorter scenes, there was, it was just a matter of, well, where do you stop and where do you start? But the other scenes did have minimal coverage, like an angle this way and an angle that way, and not much else really. And they were designed, the whole film was designed to have this flow that went from one scene to the next, and sort of just this non-stop kind of flow. In a very physical way as well, because the camera's moving quite a lot through it all. So within the scenes, there's minimal editing within the scenes, but it doesn't mean there isn't editing, and that's really interesting because I've done a few films like this actually. I've done a couple of films with single shot scenes, and this was a bit more elaborate than that. Sleeping Beauty for one, yeah. Still got involved. Yeah, and another film before that, very obscure film called On the Notion of Compromise, which was very uncompromisingly shot as single shots, and there were monologues as well. But that was very good training for me a long time ago. Yeah, I like doing that film. But this film actually did cast my mind back to when I used to watch Prisoner, which is also a very minimalist sort of production because it's very cheap and had very minimalist coverage as well. And I remember seeing some scenes where there'd be like just one cut in the scene. You think, oh, that's interesting. And if there is only one cut, it's got to be the right one, and it's got to be in the right place. And where do you put it? And so it's a matter of finding the fulcrum point within the scene, cutting from here to this side to that side, and finding that moment in the scene. And there's one scene in particular where I did that, and it was interesting, and Crave liked it, but then we wound up kind of putting a little bit more back and forth in it as well. But at that point, it's where the Aboriginal police officer turns up at the Aboriginal girl's grandmother's house.
All right.
And the grandmother asks her, well, whose side are you on, basically. That was the point. And that's where we cut from the grandmother round to Shari Stebbins. Yeah, and then we did wind up putting a couple more shots in there, but that was the major point. But the other thing I was going to say is that then the most interesting it means you get to focus more on the big structure, which is getting back to your question, because you can't do too much fiddling with the internals. There's a bit you can do, but it's quite finite. So you're dealing with the bigger flow of things, and when you go from one strand to another and back and forth like that. And as for us to how that unravelled, it's hard for me to remember the specifics of that, other than that yes, you just did it. It would seem, hard to say, and I can't remember who made those decisions. We all did, and it was about well, we go from this person to that story now, and it's different to the script, but let's do it.
Yeah. Because you made it right. And that's always, if it's still wrong, then you kind of, it bothers you. But when it's right, you just go, you let it go and that's it. You don't think about it again. It's gone, click.
Yeah.
You know it works.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's like the brother's revenge story. I'm a bit of a wuss. I just find that a bit, oh God, oh no, oh no, you know. And then you go back to the other story and then by the time you're going, oh no, again, you're cutting back. So... It was, you know, it was right because it made me squirm, made me uncomfortable, and then I was...
Yeah.
But so did you change the... So the script was bloody good script?
Yes,
For
well, I mean, it all worked on the page, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything... there were some doubts in my mind about some parts of the script. I was a bit worried about the middle of the film, but other than that... no. And the middle of the film is something that we did work on a lot during the course of it, right up until the very last minute, really. Yeah.
Just the pacing thing?
Yeah, the pacing thing. There was it's sort of the midpoint of the film, and it was very strong for some characters, and not so strong for others, and I just thought, I wonder how this is going to work out. So we did address it in some ways with ADR, extra lines, but also most helpfully with the pacing. It just we just sort of ramped it up, really.
Yeah.
And this happened at the last minute. It was something that had been bugging us for a while, and we tried a few things, and then the last thing we tried worked. So
it's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Something annoys you, and you keep going back to it because you know it's not right, and you sort of go, you look at it again, and you think, no, I'm not going to accept that. Come on, let's go back, drill down, find out why it's just not. Something's wrong there. I get distracted. I come out of the film. Yeah, something's...
Yeah.
The more you do, the more you be attuned to it.
I guess, yeah.
You know?
I watched the film again this morning, actually, to remind myself. And... yeah. And I was looking at the middle. I couldn't remember how it had been any other way, actually. I would have had to go back to the assembly and earlier edits to see how it had been. But I knew that it worked the way it was now. Yeah,
it's like that thing of how do you, when you're in there and you're saying, you know, you're increasing the tension. Like, are you talking about cutting quicker, or is that giving things more space? Because sometimes giving things space creates a different sort of tension, takes you off in a different direction. So when you're doing that...
well, in this instance, in the middle, it meant... creating a rhythm whereby the stories, we were intercutting between the stories a bit more. So that was where the rhythm came from, not necessarily just cutting out of one scene a bit quicker, because as you say, you can actually kill the scene by doing that, or by, you know, you don't give it, you can rob it of its life, and it's, it's fatality. So, yeah, it meant just bouncing around between the three stories a little bit more than we had been up until that point. So that's how the pace got varied, really, by jumping
in and
from
out.
one to the other. Yeah.
And sort of moving the stories along, so you're a bit more into the why. Why is Brian Brown's character? What's going on there? So you get that maybe a little bit earlier, and then that means that the next one, you know, how far along in that story are you to balance that? Yeah,
and they're midpoints. You know, the three stories do sort of have their peaks and troughs in similar, you know, places. I mean, you know, and they're following a big pattern overall. But it's just a matter of who comes first and which is the most rewarding, happen first and go with the others. And they don't all happen exactly the same time either, because that'd be a little bit artificial perhaps, and
a bit tidy.
Yeah, too tidy. So yeah, that's
Fascinating. Thank you. I know it's really hard. These films, you know, it's been a while since you've done them. Bring it all back because we've just seen it, so it's fresh. So Merlin, can I pounce on you?
I thought I was safe by sitting.
No, you're not. No, I can see you. I want to talk about how you maintain the growing tension between the three characters: the husband, the girlfriend, and your female victim. I mean, the same thing. I told you I was a wuss. It's like when I just couldn't bear the tension anymore, you'd cut out of that scene and then it would start to build again for the next sequence and away you go again. And in editing terms, I just want to talk about how you approach that, like you've got the script. But that's very different because I think a lot in this film is the silence, the tension between that's not words. So can you tell me a little bit about how, when you started assembling it, how you found those tensions and expanded on them?
Yeah, I think, just listening to what Nick's already said as well, it's like for me, editing is very much like an intuitive process and a technical process. So there's the intuitive side of where you're reacting to the performances and you're trying to emotionally feel what the audience might feel when you watch it. And then there's the technical process of actually deleting a lot of footage, really. So, yeah, for me, like the most important time I watch the film is the first time when I watch the rushes. So I'm sort of, rating all the footage at that point. That's my process. And then creating assemblies of the better parts of that. I mean, it sounds sort of obvious, but in a way I'm sort of placing all the footage down and letting it repeat. So I sort of let the scene cut itself in a way by seeing all the repetitive aspects of it and seeing which part of the performances last the longest, I guess. It's probably a bit confusing, but it's like the first time I see it, it's very much reacting to it on an emotional level and trying to sort of rate that, so it reminds me over the many months to come how I first felt about it when I first saw it.
That's a good idea, yeah.
And then I can always go back with the director or producer or whatever and play those first the first reaction to it. And it's I guess it's just it's a slow process of placing all the footage out, letting it sort of wash over you, and
because once you've got your best performance of her, and then his best performance to him, and then putting them together, and then finding the space between them that's right, or the play between them. Yeah,
like it's you. I guess you're watching the footage, you're feeling where the edit points are in just intuitively, and then I cut it up and then place it all with all the performance of that scene, all the takes that I'm sort of reacting to, and then you sort of feel with the repeats, like they might be saying the same line over and over again, but you, when that sort of magic happens and you don't want to cut, so you're just watching the performance, and I'm just as I'm watching it, I'm putting cuts in, and then sometimes the magic happens and you just forget to put the cut in, and that's where you've got a good performance. So I'm basically looking for doing as little cuts as I can, because it's trying to pull out of just present
and
what the performer
I
is doing.
think your characters were doing too, because they're trying. It's a silent power play between them of who's got the power over the others. So maybe in doing it that way, you're finding who's got the power now. Is it the young woman, and then the girlfriend? She's got it, but then he's come home again and he takes it over. So all the time you've got that play. Is that what you were sort of trying to find? Is that?
I think that was there in the script, you know, in terms of shifting things around at appropriate times.
Because it looks simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think
when it's right.
Yeah. I mean, it is a testament to those actors, really, because they are so fantastic in the film. And most of the time, it is easy because they're just giving you such wonderful things. So you're just making sure that you watch everything and you don't miss out on some of those good performances. And you're trying to make a decision between two good performances or more.
Oh, you poor thing.
And then then there's the more kind of there's the more like the issues of the film, which comes up through, you know, just watching it and having comments, this doesn't work, doesn't make sense, or so there's always
finally get that closed door, which is the most terrifying closed door. That was a great moment, and I thought the editing in this is really, really good because I'm terrified of a closed, ordinary suburban door. I just do not want to know. That was absolutely amazing, and the sounds that you left over that closed door, and the length of time you left that for a long time. It was excruciating because I was as claustrophobic as she was in that room. It was. Did you feel like you were really pushing?
I think that was the idea of the film. Really, was to push, and then there's another scene where they chain her to the bed. Yeah. And that had coverage. No, it was. I think when they first chain her to the bed, so they grab her. If anyone hasn't seen it, I'm spoiling it. But they grab her and take her into the room and chain her to the bed, and that's all covered in a wide shot. But it's quite a long shot; might go for a minute or something. And we had coverage inside the room, but it just felt.
You can't get out of this.
It just felt better to play the whole thing on a wide shot. I think it's, you know, it comes down to. It's easy to overcut, and it just something feels more real with just not
because
cutting.
You couldn't escape the cut either.
Well, yeah, that's right.
You're trapped.
Literally, you're putting them there in the kitchen, watching them in the bedroom, and so there was you know decisions about that, and luckily Ben was on the same page as me, and we just did that.
So it was the first time you'd worked with him?
Yeah, it was. So we've been friends for 10 years, but never worked together. So, yeah.
So, like, were there some surprises for you within doing that film? Like
on a personal level with him, or?
Yeah, or both things. Like, that was what was in his mind to do a film like that, and to and to go with it, and sort of, because it's a very I found that a really, really disturbing film in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
And you know, there's some images there that sort of pop up unwantedly sometimes because you did such a bloody good job. So
thank you. I think the big surprise was that Emma's character was not the main character when in the script. So Vicky, Ashley's character Vicky, was the main character, and then there was a conscious decision that that Emma was taking over the film, and that was probably better. So she just had she had many more changes in the film, and you just felt a lot for her. So I think it was the initial feeling when when I read the script that to make sure that her changes were going to be believable, because it all happened over a weekend basically, and she changes so dramatically. So that was always something I was sort of watching and concerned about when the footage was coming through. And we did actually reshoot one scene where she was she's left at home alone with Vicky for the first time, and she's quite sad in that moment. But when I got the footage in, she wasn't sad, and then I said, I think this is a really important moment, so they actually reshot that where she was sad, so you start to feel for her at that point. But
when you're sort of burrowing down into it, and you've got the glances, the look, that's power between people. We're looking, you know, it's
Yeah.
like it's the look, the glance, and so finding that there was sort of it had been shot like that because they're great actors, so they're holding those moments there.
Yeah.
So you had plenty to. Was that sort of what you were using? What do you look for when you're sort of trying to build up a tension in the scene where, you know, is she going to help her? The what's the girl on the bed?
Vicky.
Vicky's. Yeah, is she going to help her, or is she? How afraid of him is she? Is Emma? You know,
Yeah.
those things. It's in the face somehow. Do you?
Yeah, well, I think it's like I was saying before, maybe I wasn't articulating it very well, but no, I mean, I felt like I wasn't. But basically, the performances are so good, I was just laying them all down together and letting, you know, time repeat. So a lot of the moments in the film are actually, you know, repeated time. So you sort of, obviously you have a whole performance on one actor and then you have the whole performance on the other. And because there's, you know, around where the dialogue is happening, you don't want repeated dialogue because that's a bit not, you know,
obvious.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the looks, you can really draw them out. And that the first edit that I do is everything completely drawn out. And the first edit was 3 hours. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, there's like those slow motion phantom moments in there as well. So that footage really did yeah, that was quite long, those bits, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for doing a really great job on that.
Thanks.
That was really amazing. So Toby, Toby, in Masterchef, you don't really have a script. You have I suppose, a style template to work with, kind of, and then you've got a couple of things to build up the tension for each sort of episode. You introduce each character with a brief idea of who they are, what's at stake for them, and then building up the drama of whether they get an apron or not. And then, but how do you get that right across an episode with the different characters and things? How do you go about?
So I guess reality.
What do you do?
Reality is technically called reality as a genre. It's probably more helpfully called unscripted because you don't have that script. And so for us, I mean, I guess Masterchef episode 1 is a bit of an odd example, but like in general, one of the first things we actually try to do is create that script, not in a written form, but in a conceptual form. So one of the things which I guess we can't change is, first episode, who gets an apron? You know, what food they cooked, etc. Or on a normal episode, who wins, who loses, etc. And so we know how our story is going to end. We then just have to actually try to, I guess, develop a script or a clear story, character arcs, but also overall story, overall episode arcs as well, so that drama plays out, emotion builds and flows and sort of changes. And you can tell an episode's not working when you haven't got that conceptual script working right. So one of the things for a normal episode that we'll do is what I call a positive and negative flow. Right? The show, on average, while there's tension, while there's drama, etc., aims to have a more positive feeling. It's inspiring about the food and that sort of stuff. And if we have too many scenes where people stuff up, people have problems, etc., in a row, you start to get down about it. You start to not feel as positive about what they're doing. You start to get an overall sense that things aren't going well and maybe that they're actually not as good as they are. P.S. Usually they're actually fairly good contestants in real life, and so it's much easier to actually make them shine as a character. And so we'll rearrange things so we actually have positive elements at enough times so that you don't get down and depressed about things. We'll have drama spaced in certain ways, and so not only as a character arc it works, but also as a great whole episode arc it works. So once we've got that in place, I guess for me, scenes play out quite easily because you're forced to go, not just in this scene what's working, what moments we actually like, and obviously you have them and you go through and, you know, maybe it's a 1 hour cook, up to like 6 hour cook with like 10 cameras, so like 60 hours worth of footage just for the cook itself. It's ridiculous. And so you, out of all that footage, once you've got your conceptual script working, then you can go, okay, this moment's playing to that drama. That moment's building there. I love this moment, but it doesn't work into the greater sort of story arc and script that you have. And so it's one of those, you know, that old saying, you know, the quality of the film is recognised by what you leave on the editing room floor. So if you get rid of good stuff, you'll make a great film. If you just get rid of average stuff, you'll probably make a decent film. And it's the same sort of thing with these sort of stories. Like, we get rid of great moments all the time. We get rid of stuff that we loved and thought was brilliant, but was stopping the actual the episode as a whole from actually working. So yeah, creating drama predominantly is about clarity in what your actual storytelling is for unscripted sort of work. And so I'll work with a post-producer, so I guess sort of a mini director, and they'll have some idea of where they think the story arcs will go. And I'm quite a hands-on editor in terms of thinking structure and sort of flow and the like.
Are you making those decisions yourself? I mean, like...
If they're a weak post-producer, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
If they're a good post-producer, that's the better one. Together. Because then you actually have a collaboration. They'll go, I think this is a structure. I'll go, I love that. We can make that moment better. We can link it into the next one so it flows. So you actually care about this character. And so it means that when you come to the next person as a contrast, you care about them more because, you know, the feeling comes through, or you see that they're going well. It's a greater contrast that they're not. So you can actually raise the drama in the next moment by clarity in the previous sort of moment. And so, yeah, I'll push that hard. Sometimes I've had post-producers which are fine, but I don't know. I get a little bit excited when you actually got these people who are contestants and you can actually turn them into characters, people that you actually care about on screen, because that's what we're doing. We're making story.
Because there's sometimes, when I was watching that episode, the short little stories, the backstory you pop out to, and they're very, very short, but they're very informative and they're very, you know, important for your empathy with that character and what the outcome is and what they're going to achieve. So
yeah, so that episode was a particularly curious one. So it's episode 1. It's the first episode. For those that haven't watched it, you've got, I don't know, 50, 60 people or something auditioning to the judges, and 20-odd people get in. Well, essentially, the judges can hand out as many aprons as they like, up to 24. They've been getting excited in the last few years, and so instead of a nice manageable like 12 to start with, and a few episodes later they get the others, they've been handing out like 20-odd. So we have to somehow, within an hour and a half, 2 hours episode, fit 21 people in some way, shape or form, but then make it clear enough so you actually, as a whole episode, it works. And so those little vignettes, those little backstories, every single one plays a very important role at the time it does. And quite often they're the things we rework the most, because we realise it's a lovely moment, we're finding out something about them, but it doesn't play into the greater story arcs. It doesn't play into the development of a character at that moment, but more importantly for that sort of episode, because we've got so many characters, it doesn't play into the flow of the overall episode. So we would actually sit down for that one and go, at this point, we need to find someone who we're actually happy that they don't get it. At this point, it's been a bit too serious. We need a laugh. At this point, we want to feel a bit better. And so we'll rearrange the structure and the order of the whole entire thing so that each one of those little moments actually plays into the greater virtual script that we sort of create.
So you really enjoy doing this, don't you?
So I got into cutting this sort of stuff maybe like 6 years ago, and I was very apprehensive about getting into it. You know, like reality as a genre has a bit of a stigma and sort of stuff like that. But I think over that sort of time, especially about then, while it's always been around, I guess more so the higher ups have, I guess, really been pushing that storytelling craft and the expectation of a higher quality. And while you don't see it with all of it, and there's always going to be examples of bad stuff, the good stuff is really exciting because you do actually get to sit down and in some ways write the script, like of actually the whole thing. You don't have to stick to the characters as they were or whatever, or like, and listening to you guys talk is great. I mean, I love it because we do all that sort of stuff, but we also have this extra layer which we're forced to actually start writing the script from almost this base framework. This person wins, that person loses. You sort of have to have them in. But you don't have to have all those characters in. You could probably get some more of them if you want. Yeah, it's awesome.
And I think you changed... He just loves it.
I do. I love it.
And changing the pacing and things, because it could get easily so repetitious. You go, oh, nervous person comes out, does the, cooking. This is my backstory. Oh, now I'm going to get my apron. Am I or not? But it doesn't. It doesn't. It's really, it's really fresh.
So my wife has never actually watched anything I've ever cut in my professional life, so she finally watched that episode, and her response at the end was, "Oh, it was actually good, wasn't it?" Thanks. But that's it. I mean, we're talking I think it was 81 minutes of actual content, not including ads, and so we're talking it's almost a 90-minute feature there. When you knock off credits at the end, it's pretty close to a 90-minute feature, and you're right. When you're dealing with 21 people who are going to rock up, cook for an hour, make some food, say a few things about how much they want this apron or whatever. So I have the same 3 judges we've been seeing for this. We're going into series 10 now. We've got it for the 9th. So that's not including the 5 spin-offs of a series. We all know how it works. And so actually crafting that actual flow, that slow moments, the faster moments, the montages, to actually make us feel a certain things. These montages aren't just, oh, we got to dump someone in there. Each one we choose who's going in there to give a certain tone and feel for that moment because it's needed for the actual greater sort of story arc.
You go batting for him because he's just a forklift driver with a passion.
That's it. Yeah.
That's great.
He almost didn't make it in as a feature.
Oh.
Yeah.
The power.
We control your lives. Don't be a contestant.
Isn't it good, these mics? So, Rodrigo, you're next. So, in 7 Types of Ambiguity, episode 1, it's Joe's point of view, this one. You've got a great screenplay to start with.
Yep.
Terrific performances.
Yep.
So tell me about this. You've got the assembly edit, and you're working from there to get a sort of this sense of, what is it? It's a mystery. It's very uncertain. What's going on? Things don't make sense, and we're going to follow you through that. So once you've got your assembly, what are you sort of hooking into when you're looking at it?
I guess I'd talk specifically about 7 types, because generally whenever I start any film, show, doco, television drama, I don't know how I'm going to cut it. I'm just terrified. I've no idea how I'm going to do this.
How do I do this again?
And almost it's almost like that for every cut. But on 7 Types of Ambiguity, because it is so much about point of view, it's written about with point of view in mind. Each of the episodes is a person's point of view of an event and the ramifications of that or what's going on around their lives. So Glennon had a very clean idea as to how he's going to shoot it with Bonnie, who's over there. And so we had a little meeting and he showed me a clip from The Slap. And it was, funnily enough, a scene with Alex Dimitriades in it, where the camera... he's talking to his wife and the camera just slowly pushes in and tracks around, and it's a one-shot scene. And he's almost doing no talking. His wife's doing all the talking. So he said, I want this is the point of view feel that I want. I want to really own this guy's world. So it was a very kind of clean thesis for me to follow when I was doing the assembly. So I was like, oh, great, now I do know how I'm going to cut it. That's awesome. So it became about how far you could push that point of view. And like you said, the scripts were great, and they're quite atmospheric, and they're all about discovering things that you may not know are important at the time, or you know that they're important at the time, but you don't know why. So really, the whole episode is about discovering information about Joe's world, and because of the story, each discovery increases a sense of dread for Joe. So it's an escalation story, or editorially, we're just escalating. We're pushing his character. We're holding on things. For me, I was trying to play as much, not necessarily play everything as a one shot, but try and play as much as I could on what he was doing, regardless of what other people were saying or doing.
Because you have fantastic actors in
Yes.
this series.
Yep.
So they're all good. And they're like I don't know. Great actors are kind of like magnets. They sort of attract your attention when they're there. And if you're trying to do it from one point of view, you kind of, how are you controlling that? How do you?
I guess you look at a performance, kind of like what Merlin's saying, is you don't want to cut it. But for me, it's do I believe what's happening? And how involved am I in that particular moment as he's saying those words or as he's holding a look? And it is instinctive. I mean, I don't think there's much of a way around it. When I was an assistant, I asked Alex for some editorial advice, and this is in Avid times, we're cutting on computers, and he said to me, I can give you 2 very important pieces of advice. You make sure you keep it in sync, and don't cut in the middle of a frame. And I was like, really? That's the advice you're giving me?
You keep it all to yourself.
But Alex started off with film, so that's what his editor told him when he was an assistant, and the reality is that it is instinctive. It's like breathing. You don't know why you want to cut what you cut, but filmmaking or television or stories are about how we react to things. So. You're an editor, and you have to be quite honest about the way you're reacting to things emotionally. Also, narratively, like there was the moments in Seven Types where I was like, Glendon was the director, Glenn and Ivan, I don't know what they're talking about. I've cut this scene, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what is going on there. So we had to write a scene to put in later to explain that moment. Okay, because for me, I was like, oh, God, sure, we can put that out, but I don't know. I mean, I'm the editor, and I've watched everything. I don't know what's going on. Is it going to be? Yeah. But yeah, so it is about being quite honest in your reactions to material, and it's kind of not wanting to cut in the sense of 7 Types of Ambiguity. We really didn't want to cut that much. We really wanted the world, because the episode's about how deep he's going under, how bad things are getting for Joe. Yeah. We just wanted to be able to see that happen. Yeah,
but without it getting, like some films, I don't know, every now and then you see a really dud film, and it's because every moment is significant. And then it's another moment that's really significant. And, it's sort of, it just, all the energy, it's all gone. It's just, you see, and you've got it, you're tracking that, but you're not letting it linger and lose its oomph and its energy.
Yeah, look, I think part of it is, like, Seven Types of Ambiguity is I think it's a really good show because it's got a great script and it's really well directed and really well shot, and, to the point where, and production design and performance. All those things, I think, were working beautifully. And the score is fantastic too, and the sound design is great, and that kind of comes after what we're working. But so I'm looking at with 7 Types. I didn't have to create that much. It was on the page. Apart from a couple of things, I don't know what that means.
But some of the repeated shots and things, were they, the bus, the sort of those things, they're repeated. Are they your ideas? Were they sort of things you threw in?
The bus for episode 1?
Oh my God.
Was it bus?
No, it's the little boy disappearing at the beginning, and you don't know what's going on, and it's repeated a number of times.
Oh, that's the opening. And that's.
Was that all just within the script?
Well, the opening of I think the opening was in the script. Too long ago.
It's a long time.
No. The opening was written as that scene, and we do flash back to it. I think that was. I think we didn't do that in the edit. We didn't do that much. Kind of like.
Mucking around with it.
Yeah. And I think because A, it was really good on the page, and B, Glendon and Bonnie had a really clear way of how they were about telling the story, and that's a joy for an editor when you've got. They're the kind of jobs I love, where it's all really working. And in a way, your job as an editor is to just make sure the story's moving in the right direction, with the characters at the points that we need to be, and almost stay out of the way. There were a couple of moments in there where they, Glenn, I remember talking to Glenn and saying, "Hey man, it'd be great when we're at the school and Joe finds out that the kid's missing, and then we cut to, we're like, oh my God, he's on a close up and the kid's missing. He's just to talk to his wife, what's going to happen, and then we cut to this sort of very I sort of felt very bland shot of Joe running through the street, and I was like, man, it'd be awesome to just get a big wide shot of the school from up high and have him run off, and so you sort of spread the dread across the geography.
Where is he going to look?
Yeah, where's he going to look? He's going to try and find his kid. And Glenn said, oh, you know, you're right, but let's not do that. Let's instead shoot some more stuff to build it. And so I got all that material, and I thought, oh, it'd be really great to just take the sound out. Like there was
moment of horror.
yeah, we'd escalate. I felt like we were escalated to a point where we kind of couldn't do much more without having to use all the other tools that you have as an editor, which is your temp music and your sound design and so forth. And we were getting bits from the composer at that point, ideas as to what, you know, how things would sound. And I was like, well, this is a moment where you could just totally just do it with music and just take the sound out and just hold on Joe and an environment where, you know, the school's empty, there's cops, and then bring the sound back slowly as he's running through the streets and really extend that sequence of him looking for the boy. I mean, that's because it's very little time from the moment that we discover that he's gone to the moment we discover that he's found. So there was room in there for as I was cutting it, I was like, oh, let's make that a bit more. I mean, that's sort of the crux of the story for Joe, that he's kind of like an unlikable guy. Yeah. He's this stockbroker that's doing illegal shit, but you still got to care for him. Otherwise, by the end of the film, you're like, or the end of the show, you're like, I don't care. This is really. Why do I care about this guy? And the one thing that he has, that we all have, is this. You know, if you've got kids, I've lost my kid. I want my kid back. I've got to get back.
And that sick feeling.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
sort of
So
like
that was.
where everything. It's very to take the sound out, and that's.
And also the way it was shot too. It's one of my favourite shots in the show where Bonnie just kind of slightly pushed in on Joe as the teacher's calling the other room or something. Oh, is the little boy there? No, and she's doing all the talking, the phone ringing. There's a conversation playing past the camera, but we're just on Joe. The camera's just doing a little push in. There's like this long shot, and then he sort of the lady says, and we had the courage to cut to the lady to say, oh shit, he's gone. But the shot was doing it all. You know, Bonnie and Alex were doing that moment, and Alex stepped forward, and Bonnie kept pushing in, and we ended up on, like without even realising, we ended up on this sort of medium close-up mid-shot of him going, I've got to find my son, and then we cut to the rest. So a lot of the times it's not just about a performance. I mean, that is key, and that's what you want every performance to be as best as it possibly can be on you in the final edit. But there are so many other things going on that you've got to pay attention to that tell the story. And cinematography is one of them. Production design is another one. Music is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The more you edit, the more you can find instinctively those moments and where to extend them. It's a very interesting part of editing, isn't it? Where the power is in the cut. To extend or to withdraw the tension.
Yeah, I mean,
when you release it.
Yeah, well, when I break a sort of, when I break a scene down into the simplest, what am I trying to do here? You're looking at someone wants something, and there's an obstacle in their way, and generally you're kind of cutting fundamentally based on those two things. When the character finds something, when you achieve his goal, that's, whether it's be a bit of information or an emotional response. When he's got what he wants, then there's no more to the scene.
No more point.
Yeah, there's no more point to that moment of that scene. And or he gets to an obstacle, he's going for something, and something comes in its way. That's kind of it's a natural cutting point, and it's about what kind of keeps the film moving or keeps the story moving. And sometimes it is a look, sometimes it is the way the camera's pushing in, sometimes it's quite naturally the character getting what they want or being met with an obstacle. So there's every time you make, which is why I'm terrified whenever I start a film, because there's so many reasons to cut.
Yeah.
And you just got to try and pick the
The
right,
right
one,
one,
at
the
the right
right
time.
one.
Yeah.
And keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you do another good cut, please? Yeah, yeah. So I'd like to talk to Alexandra. In Lion, there are two interwoven stories about the past and the present. So, and they both have significant moments, like when Saru's alone, realises he's alone at the train station, or he's locked in the train. He actually is locked in a train and he cannot get out. Or maybe it's the moment where he looks at those Indian sweets, and I looked it up, they're called jalebi. Is that what you say?
Yes.
Jalebi?
Jalebis.
Jalebis. Or the need when he needs to find his origin, and he uses the Google Earth, pathway to do that. I think many of those critical moments happen visually, without dialogue. So I just want to sort of find out, how do you make those moments as significant as this, as they are in the final film, when you've got, a collection of shots of rushes, maybe talk about the train station or something, whatever you like, and you create those moments.
With sound. You do it all with sound. You once you find the beats in the train station, I'll take you back a little step, and we have to remember two things about this film. The first one is that it's a true story, so we have to be true to the story, and we can't invent things because people will know. And second, that we're dealing with a 5-year-old actor. Okay, and this actor has been, dropped in the middle of Calcutta, in the middle of a crowd, without knowing where he is, or put in the busiest train station in the world, on Howrah Station in Calcutta. And so it's quite overwhelming for him. It's real, and they did it in a very documentary way. They left him loose, with a few people looking after him around, and had 3 cameras shooting, and he performed. He was extraordinary. So the particular scene that you're talking about, the train station, where he realizes that he's alone. First of all, he arrives into that train station with his brother. He's convinced his brother that he's old enough to go and work. He can come with him and start being a man and work, and he's 5 years old. And the brother goes, okay, well, if you want to come, off we go. He falls asleep in the train. They arrive to the station. He's completely asleep, and the brother says, I have to go to work. I'm going to put you on the bench here. You're going to stay here, and you're going to wait for me. And the last image we see of the brothers is the jalebis. Remember to bring me some, And he falls asleep. We've arrived in this place, and it's full on noise. We're hearing all of this. We're hearing from the perspective of a 5-year-old. So the station is really, really noisy. There is crowds. There is a whole world around him, and he goes to sleep. And then he wakes up, and it's silent. The whole station has disappeared. There is no one there. All we hear is some crickets. There is some very distant traffic from the city, but we don't hear anything. The world is gone, And he's not worried. He wakes up and he looks for his brother. So all of that was planned. It was shot, and there were angles. There was, as you can imagine, much more than what ends up in the cut. And then this little boy looks for his brother. That's what you would do at that stage. And he looks around and doesn't see him. There's a dog. I think the dog stays in the cut from memory. There were people at some stage that were a bit scary, which we took out. And goes into a train that is there parked, and makes a step that he shouldn't make, and finds a little corner where he can falls asleep, and the next thing that wakes him up is the noise of the train. So the whole thing, the whole drama, the whole expectation has been created through sounds, through noise, It's what we did. Same with the Google Earth. I think we went completely quiet and silent at that point in time. Rodrigo used the same technique on a previous scene, and the last one you asked for was.
And the sweets.
Anyway, and the sweets. Yeah, looking for the sweets with his Indian friends. So we use sound to great efficiency in this film. I think it was one of the great tools.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's so subtle. It's not subtle.
You don't know. You don't realize. I mean, if you look at the film,
manipulator.
And that's what we do. This film has a piece of music at the opening credits, and then there is no music for about 15 minutes. We are in the real world. Yeah, Yeah. See, you didn't know. Nobody noticed that, you know. There is only music when the music starts again when he realizes that he's lost in the train and he's in the run, and we have a big wide of the train, and that the music, the score starts there. Before that, we have heard incidental music, I think, from Streets, but not score. And so we've tried to make this film a real event by interfering as little as possible in terms of score, in terms of music, in terms of, and make it real. But the idea of having the world of this boy coming from sound should be different than what we normally hear as an adult. You know, the sound should be enhanced, should be much more specific and probably scary to some point. Some point.
Because it's also building up, like you don't just cut to his face going, oh, you know, I'm lost. It's sort of like the way of finding the right sequence of shots to drill in, and that's a pacing thing as well. To find, and like the train, the cutting in the train, and then the claustrophobia because he can't get out. He's moving. He's moving, locked, but he can't get out.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. But it happens, you know. Yeah. You just try. You just put all the shots you have and all the good moments.
Did you play with that? Around with those scenes a lot?
Oh, did we ever? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Till it goes.
Till it works. Until it works. You just keep going at it and keep hammering until things work. And you overcook it. You come back. You cut it too much. And at some stage you're gonna go, I'm there. It works. It feels good. I'm scared. I'm feeling for him. Let's move on. That's
so, and you get it. Sometimes, you know, you're sort of cutting something and it's nearly right. You think, that'll be right for now. We'll go and look at the whole cut and see how it fits into the cut, and then you come back.
Yes, many times.
Yeah.
many times. Look, you. As I said, it's totally an instinct. I think we all agreed on that. You know, it's been fascinating to hear what my colleagues have to say, and particularly Toby, because I've never been part of that reality world. I've got many things, you know, from documentaries to commercials to films and television, but never a reality. And I'm fascinated by what you have to say, you know, because I've always wondered how do you handle those kind of things, you know, the 10 cameras and footage. Anyway, that's a different story. We can talk about it later. I'm sure, and I'm sure there are systems. We all have a system that we follow. So look, cutting a film. All films are different. All films come with their own problems and with their own issues, and it's never easy. I've never been in 32 years of cutting. You know, I've never had a job that was easy as such. Lion had an extraordinary script that was so overwritten. We had 260 scenes from memory in 110 pages. And that's Michael Bay's pace normally. You know, that's a film that moves along. So our first problem was to get rid of stuff, to clean up, you know. In my signature, I call myself Alexandre de Franceschi, film editor, cleaner. I am a cleaner. I am totally a cleaner. That's what we do. We get rid of the shit, excuse my English, you know. And we try to do that as elegantly as possible. And Lion had many interwoven stories that were beautiful on page, that were really relevant, you know. We had girlfriends, we had brothers, we had family that unfortunately didn't make it because of time. And comprehension, and the story needed to move forward. So the first thing you were talking about assemblies and what do you do from there. We had a beautiful 3.5-hour assembly. It worked amazingly well. It was quite extraordinary, you know. And then obviously we have distributors that can't put a 3.5-hour film on screen, but we have to move. So you end up combining situations, you know, like originally. The little Saru takes a train, arrives to Calcutta, discovers that he's in this station, gets into another train, and goes back. Tries to go back, comes back. So there was a good 10-15 minutes of a whole story happening there that we had to lose because there was no reason for it to be there. So once he arrives. That happened all through the film, and then a very interesting thing about this film were flashbacks. And I don't know if anybody has ever worked on a film with flashback. I was lucky or unlucky enough that I cut a film many years ago called Painted Veil, we had quite a few flashbacks, and I learned many lessons from that. And one of them is that you can put them anywhere you want. You really can. You can move them around, and you can combine them. And when I read the script, I went, "Oh, I'm going to be in trouble," you know. And we were in trouble, indeed, indeed. So combining those flashbacks.
Were there as many flashbacks in the original script?
No, there were less, I think,
Okay.
from memory, and they were placed differently. But what we found as we were cutting is that the most interesting places of the film, or the one that were really touching our audiences, was this little boy. So the more we had of him, the better always. So there were moments, you know, when we thought, okay, we've been with the adults, or in Tasmania, or in Melbourne, or wherever we were long enough, and we're losing a little bit track of the little boy. Let's go back to him, and that paid off quite substantially, quite well. But the script kept on changing daily as they were shooting. You know, it was quite daunting, you know, because you'll get new pages every day. I don't know how Garth did it. Garth is the director, who had a really clear idea of what the film needed to be, and he had great direction. But boy, did the film evolve, you know. And then we had footage, as you can expect. We had quite a bit of footage. I remember telling the producers, one of the producers was quite unexperienced at the beginning, and I had worked previously with Garth and the DP, Greg Fraser, and I said to her, look, be aware of one thing, these guys know how to turn on the camera, they don't know how to turn it off, you know, so we're going to have to go through things, you know.
Yeah.
So I do know where you're coming from a little bit, you know.
Because
And,
one of the things is that, like, the little boy's story, it's, as you say, it's got quite a documentary kind of feel. You're in this real place, and then the present day story in Tassie doesn't really.
No, it completely changes. It changes.
Yeah, so
the camera changes, you know, because much more static, much more traditional filmmaking, slower pace. We go into real drama, you know. We're going to proper actors, and the drama unfolds as in a normal film, as you would say. I personally like that. I like the difference between the two films. I think the trick was to combine the two completely different ways of approaching the film and make that work together.
Am I being too silly to say it was like it's like the first part of the film is like a memory. It's like a memory of images of place, and then here I am, a conscious self in the present day, sort of.
Absolutely. That's what the whole film is about. It's about the memory. You got it right. Yes. So it was an adventure. I mean, I was very attracted by this film because of the story, you know. And I was lucky enough. The film came to me in a strange way. But I remember meeting the real Saru we were in LA at the time, and there was a meeting among people, and I'm sitting next to this Indian guy, and he goes, "Oh, you know, I've just been at Google, and I've made a conference at Google, and it went really well." I'm going, "Oh, Google, what are you doing?" You know, and he tells me his story. So there was Saru Bradley, the real one. And we were sitting on a table with producers and writers, and he said, and he was going, "Yes, and we're going to make a film. You know, I'm writing the book as we speak, and we're going to make a film. And that guy is going to direct it, and that guy is going to write it, and those guys are going to produce it." And I went, "I'm going to cut it, you know." And so those circumstances, you know, make the moment special, and yeah.
And what was your? I'm going to ask everybody, what was the most difficult, or what was your most favourite scene in that film to cut, do you think? Was that too...
There were two, you know, we finished two films, and one was 2 hours 9, and I personally think it was the perfect film. And then we had it was finished, it was mixed, it was scored, it went out to festivals. That's the film that got reviewed. And then we got a lot of pressure from our American producers, and who wanted a 2-hour film. It was like the aim. So we had to lose 10 minutes. And one of the scenes we lost in that, I mean, both cuts had been out, so the cut that got awarded last night was the long one, and so to say. And the one of the scenes, or one of the moments that we lost, was a scene that I was quite attached to. It was they go dancing with his in present time, you know, with the new girlfriend. They go into kind of a cave, and they have a dance, and they kiss for the first time. And then we continue, and then there is a big moment of a huge flashback going back to the village where his brother is being arrested because he's stolen some eggs or something like that.
Yes.
And there's a big thing with the mother, the brother, the police, and that was one of my favorite scenes. It's not in the film.
That's life. That's terrible.
Exactly.
Nick, what
Well, because of the nature of the of Australia Day, there's not so many scenes that you get attached to in that way because of any work that you've done on them. It's different, but the interesting strand for me, which I realised this morning, was the sort of fourth story that's going through it secretly, not so secretly, but there's the towards the end of the film, there's a minister that's going to be part of an assassination attempt. Brian Brown's going to try and assassinate her, and but that had to be built up to quite a bit through, and it was written, but that there were these radio and TV references to her. So there's a whole other world of radio and television that's another story that's going throughout the whole film, and you're not really aware of it, but then it all sort of contributes and builds up. And that was actually
was that you, Nick?
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it was intended, but there was a lot of work that had to go into it, and so that it didn't seem too bald and on its own. There had to be lots of other radio and TV things which were in there as well. So we wound up getting a lot of friends of ours into the cutting room and giving them a recorder and saying, just read these lines, here, read this. And that became very, very movable as well. The TV stuff was, well, we could use it here. Oh, no, we could use that there. And then we have to use what we're using here, we have to use that. And so that was extremely, tricky and shifted all around. But it also had an ebb and flow that had to bubble up in pauses and gaps, and you'd have to hear specific key words here and there. So while there's, one-shot scenes going on, there's all these, lots of acrobatics going on with the TV and news stuff, which was sometimes the stories that they'd done they didn't make a lot of sense, so we had to just really chop the words around and go crazy with them, but make sure that they appeared just when you needed them. And so that was quite fun and interesting. Yes,
it's interesting, isn't it, how sound is such a always sound. Everyone thinks editing's just the pictures.
Yeah. Oh, Radio Man, yeah, that's right. He's going through it and providing the sort of countdown to the end of the world. Yeah. No, it just seemed like a good idea. That it was just an idea that actually we all came up with, including Creve, because he was involved with that film as well. That there would be this sort of countdown, really. And at one stage, I thought that it was a countdown of souls, like the number of people who'd died already until there was, 2 left. Kind of the reverse of, the classic creation story. But it just became about it's coming, it's closer and closer and closer, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Favourite scene?
Favourite scene?
Or something.
It's working?
Is that working? Is that working?
No, not working.
Use that one.
Cool. Favourite scene? There's a sequence in episode 1 where they find the boy and Joe and his wife go to the cop shop, and they go into the viewing rooms, and they go into 2 rooms, and in one is Xavier Samuel, who's the guy that took the boy, and the other one is Andrea, who is, we later find out, Joe's kind of hooker lover, who's also Xavier's girlfriend. And it was shot relatively early in the from memory in the shoot, and it had so little dialogue, because it was just about the detective going in. Do you know this person? And Joe's like, no. But his wife, you discovered all these things that Joe didn't know, that his wife knew the guy. And then you go into the next room and, oh my God, there's my you don't know that he knows it, but you don't know who she is, but you realise that you know her. And it was the first time that I kind of got to use, when I'm kind of cutting, one of the things that I use as a guide is, where do I want to put the close-up? I want to try and avoid the close-up and tell it at the right time, at the right kind of narrative point or emotional point for a character, and that helps me a lot in terms of how I structure the scene. I like to I try to be very minimal with close-ups, but it was the first time that we could use a big close-up of Joe, and it's when he sees Andrea in there, and I felt like it was when I started to get the rhythm of the show and the whole POV thing that we were trying to do. And again, all the camera was doing incredible work, just sort of panning down to reveal Andrea, or kind of pushing in on Joe, or like the almost, I think it might be the biggest close up of the episode is Joe when he sees that Andrea's on the other side of the glass, and I love the space in that sequence. And then we put, this whole thing, Glendon wanted to shoot aerials. I was like, no, we can't afford aerials. And I don't want a drone, I want a chopper, I want to get up high. And towards the end of the shoot, they went, okay, we've got some money, we'll go shoot some chopper shots. And they shot a bunch of stuff. And I went, let's put an aerial in between, like right at the end of this whole kind of tense sequence, because we've been inside for 10 minutes or something. Let's go out as wide as we can get in the whole of the show, and we went to this big night aerial, and it's like, that works really well. And then at the same time, we were getting stuff from Stephen, the composer, and which is amazing because he was writing stuff without seeing anything. He was just sending Stephen and his collaborator, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. But they gave us about 20, 25 cues of just experimentation and kind of tone and feel, and I stuck one on this sequence, and almost by luck, it cut. There was this massive organ kind of, and it was pretty much on the moment where I went to the wide shot, and it was like, fuck, that is amazing, and that's why it's my favorite sequence. But that's one. I think it's a very. I think as human beings, we react to people and stories in a very similar way. Alex used to tell me that editing is very much like breathing, and it's true. If you watch conversations, if you watch people listening to people kind of blink around about the same time, and which is how they're processing information. And what you're doing as an audience member is processing information, emotional information, and plot information, and so forth. But that's one of the things about music too, where if you've got a scene that's working right, and you don't know why it's working right, it just feels like it's working right, it's because intuitively it's following all the beats that the story needs, and a lot of the time you can put any piece of music on it, and it starts to hit the beats, and
the rhythm's right.
Yeah, and it's like it scores temp music from whatever movie, but I think there's a very natural rhythm to storytelling, whether it be through music or sound or picture, and it's very lovely when you kind of hit those sweet spots.
Yeah.
So favourite scene is a little bit hard. It was a bit over 10 months since we finished cutting the thing. And I say we because I'm one of two editors who was cutting it. The other one is Karen Crespo. So I'm actually going to pick one of her scenes because I really like it. And it's actually the opening few moments of the episode after the big super tease, what's happening in the whole series is finished. And unlike, I guess, a lot of what you guys are talking about, we actually have a few hundred tracks which are part of Masterchef. They have multiple stems. We can get rid of the drums there, bring the strings in there, and it's actually our job to cut the music that you hear on TV. And one of the things I guess a lot of editors will do is like, you put it in, you cut on the beat, blah, 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 blah. And she didn't cut on the beat at all. This whole opening sequence, not a single shot. She'd actually used about 3 different tracks and taken the drums for one, the drones from another, something else from another, just bringing in a little few notes. And so you had these shots setting the actual scene, the sense of place that the people, the contestants, were about to come into. Just before then, sort of especially. And you like MasterChef itself is so well known. It's like its own genre, right? And it's got its own iconography. It's got its own sort of elements and sort of stuff that we can play with. And the only time it cut on the beat was when the actual logo was finally revealed, sort of in the back of this cavernous sort of halls. And so you had this sense of almost expectation, sound, building, I guess, the significance of the moment that would then come later, and you're just waiting for it to hit on the beat, but the next shot starts just a bit before then. The beat happens, but no, it actually is just fading to black then, and you're just waiting for that moment. And so it did such an amazing job of, out of what is essentially just like a jib floating around, sort of, you know, buckets of carrots and sort of stuff, you know, in this big hall. I'm serious. There was like, oh, there's capsicums and stuff, which gave such an incredible sense of anticipation because of the music work, because of the layering there, and because of the edit not quite conforming to what us as a viewer sort of naturally feel and expect. Yeah.
I think, I'll just quickly talk about the, like, after there was a first sequence in the film, which is quite striking. It's all on Phantom footage. But just after that, we sort of then go into, in the first sequence, they basically kidnap a girl to take her to do things with her. That's not very nice, and then we go into the setup of the young girl Vicky, and we're sort of setting up her life and how she's kind of a brat, really, and that was like a big problem in the first act for the film. So like right at the last minute, we kind of decided to build some sequences of what happened to this other girl and follow Evelyn, the Emma's character. So we basically took all our offcuts and reused other takes and built some scenes, which like right at the last minute, which completely made the film work. It was yeah, we're very happy with that. But yeah, like we were taking shots where people were walked out of them and stabilizing them, and you know just trying to. It worked because we were setting up the repetition of their world, so it didn't matter that they were wearing the same clothes, or you know, or that they were doing the same actions, because it was setting up their mundane world, which was not mundane at all because of things that they were doing. Yeah.
That was the cheat of the film, wasn't it?
Yeah. So.
It all looks fine and normal, and they look so boring, and he couldn't possibly be someone who does those things. I think we've run out of time, and I'm really sorry, but we won't have time for questions or anything. But thank you very much for coming, and please...
For editors, we don't like to edit ourselves.
Yeah. So please thank our wonderful editors.